Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us at the Community IT webinar, Securing Google Workspace for Nonprofits with Steve Longenecker. Google Workspace is one of the most widely used platforms in the nonprofit sector, and the free nonprofit tier gives organizations a really powerful set of tools. But how secure is it? Steve is going to walk through the security settings and practices that are available to nonprofits in the free Google Workspace tier and share guidance on when it makes sense to consider upgrading to a paid tier for more advanced security features or using some third-party tools depending on your nonprofit's risk profile. My name is Carolyn Woodard. I am the Outreach Director for Community IT and the moderator today. I'm very happy to hear from our expert, but first I want to go over our learning objectives. So today we're going to focus on these themes. So is Google Workspace inherently secure or unsecure? What is Google Workspace's nonprofit tier and what securities does that include? What are the biggest risks nonprofits face in Google Workspace, and what actions can you take now to reduce those risks? And when should you look beyond the nonprofit tier, and what should be your first steps? And now I would like to let Steve introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Steve Longenecker, and I'm the Director of IT Consulting at Community IT. I am coming to you from sunny, beautiful Washington, D.C. Today. I'm a longtime resident of Washington, D.C., which is, I guess, Community IT's hometown. But I am a Google Workspace. I can't remember what they changed the name of the certification when I recertified. I'm not sure it's called engineer anymore, but I am a workspace administrator or something. I'm a certified Google Workspace administrator, and I've been working with our clients that have Google as their primary productivity platform for a long time. So I'm looking forward to having this discussion with everyone.
I'm so glad that you're with us, Steve, because I know in our office when we have Google questions, you're one of our great fountains of wisdom. So very happy to hear what the best practices are for security on Google Workspace, because I think that is a question that people ask a lot. Before we begin, if you're not familiar with Community IT, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about us. We are a 100% employee-owned managed services provider. We provide outsourced IT support, and we work exclusively with nonprofit organizations. Our mission is to help nonprofits accomplish their missions through the effective use of technology. We are big fans of what well-managed IT can do for your nonprofit. We serve nonprofits across the United States, although we did start in DC, as Steve said. We've been doing this for 25 years. It's our 25th anniversary this year. We are technology experts and are consistently given the MSP 501 recognition for being a top MSP, which is an honor. I can announce we just received again last week for 2026. So we don't have the logo yet that says 2026 on it, but we did. We're on the list again. And we believe that we're one of the only MSPs on the list that serves nonprofits exclusively. So I want to remind everyone that for the sake of these presentations, we're vendor agnostic. We only make recommendations to our clients and only based on their specific business needs. And we never try to get a client into a product because we get an incentive or a benefit from that. We do consider ourselves a best of breed IT provider. So it's our job to know the landscape, the tools that are available, reputable, and widely used. And we make recommendations on that basis for our clients based on their business needs, their priorities, and their budget. We did get a lot of good questions at registration, so we're going to try and answer as many as we can today, but we only have an hour, so anything we can't get to, please join us and Steve today after the webinar on our Reddit channel at r/nonprofit IT management. We're going to continue answering some questions over there for about 30 minutes after this webinar. And then if you have more questions that didn't come up or you didn't think about them, just pop them in that thread and we'll be checking in for the next couple of weeks to see what we can answer. A little bit more about us. Our mission is to create value for the nonprofit sector through well-managed IT. We also identify 4 key values as employee owners that define our company: trust, knowledge, service, and balance. We seek always to treat people with respect and fairness, to empower our staff, clients, and sector to understand and use technology effectively, to be helpful with our talents, and we recognize that the health of our communities is vital to our well-being and that work is only a part of our lives. Now we are going to jump into our first poll. All right, so the first poll is attention. How much attention does IT security get at your organization? And your answers, possible answers are too much. It makes it hard to do our jobs. Like we have to log in every time we want to do something else. Number two is just right. My organization takes security seriously and our actions show it. Number three is not enough. We say it is important, but I worry we have holes in our approach. And number four is none, and that scares me. And number five is not applicable. And you are anonymous in this poll, so you can feel free to be honest. If you're here because you are concerned about cybersecurity, you're in the right place. And Steve, can you see that?
I can.
All right. Could you let us know what the answers were?
Yes, I will do that. We had 40 people voting, and just 5% um, chose that too much option. I did want to put that on there because I do think it is possible to give too much attention to security. So um, it can happen for sure, where it just makes it impossible. But I'm really pleased that we had a good third of the people saying just right. That's wonderful. And then about half were concerned that not enough is being done. Maybe it's a good game is being talked. And then five people said none at all, and that obviously scares them.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's one of the things that we run into with Google Workspace is that you can set it up yourself and then you're not sure what have you done for security. So
Yeah.
again, no shame. Like if that's you, you're in that boat, you've come to the right place. And we have a ton of cybersecurity resources on our website as well, which I will share in the chat later. But right now we're going to hand it over to Steve. You're going to talk a little bit about that first question. Is Google Workspace secure or unsecure?
Yeah. And I think it is important to start with the fact that I would say Google Workspace, the platform, as far as it goes, is very secure. Google spends a lot of money on that. They make sure that their data centers are secure. There's encryption in transit and at rest. They have great uptime compared to like back in the day when you might have had a Microsoft Small Business server in a nonprofit's IT closet. This is a lot better now. There's just a lot less chance of things going dramatically wrong, which is what security is really all about, than there used to be. That said, I will say that Google is a little different than Microsoft in that, at least for people who are running in Windows, Windows is part of the Microsoft family. Like Microsoft makes Windows, they make Microsoft 365, and they are sort of Microsoft sort of specializes in having this stack where everything from identity to file security to email security to device security is sort of covered in one integrated place, and that can be very helpful, particularly for smaller nonprofits that can't invest in sort of a best of breed approach. Google is, I think, quite secure when it comes to email files, the things that are in Google Workspace. And it's not that you can't do any device management in Google Workspace, but we don't really see it that often, unless we're talking about managing Chromebooks, in which case Google is very strong at managing Chromebooks in Google Workspace, and that's a very secure solution often. But the other thing about Google Workspace security is that even though Google does a good job of like making its platform secure, it is a partnership. And so that's where we sometimes see insecurities emerge and is on the other side, the customer side. If you're not enforcing good password policies, if you're not doing your part with configurations and so on, which is what this whole webinar is about, then it's not going to be secure. So actually, there's this analogy that I have in my notes, I should say, think of it as like Google providing a very secure building, but they don't get to control the key. They give the key to you, and it's you that are like in charge of the key. And if you're opening the door for strangers, that's a problem.
Yeah, what is Google going to be able to do about
Right.
it?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we wanted to show this nonprofit tier. And I'm hopeful that everyone on the webinar like knows that there's nonprofits sign up for Google Workspace and there's, special pricing and all of the discount there. And Steve, we were going to just kind of briefly, I was surprised, not knowing very much about it, how many security features are included in that nonprofit tier.
Yeah, the nonprofit tier is really exceptionally generous, and it's a reason that I think a lot of especially newer and smaller nonprofits start out in Google. It's pretty easy to set up. They make a lot of the tooling um, pretty intuitive. They have really great and sort of easy to understand documentation for administrators. And yeah, it's a solid and it's the nonprofit tier is free. It's not like discounted. It's free, which is it's just an amazing option that we appreciate. So yeah, this slide, I'm not going to read all the different things, but like the number of things that Google includes in that free tier is really impressive. And as we'll talk about later, some of the things that I would say are the next layers that you need, probably you wouldn't pay Google for. They'd be more third party layers, and we'll talk about that. But it is a nice collection of things. Now, there is everything included? No, but that's kind of the way all of these platforms work. They tend to have tiers, and they're happy to move you up the chain for more functionality.
Yeah, but it's good to know that at that nonprofit level, you get a lot. I
Hmm.
want to move on and talk a little bit more about definitions. So we find a lot of people, I myself am not like very technology oriented. And so when you're dealing with technology at your nonprofit, you may feel like you don't know the lingo. You might be dealing with an IT provider who uses a lot of lingo without explaining it. We wanted to go over some common terms and demystify what we can. We don't have time to go over everything that's on this slide, but I'm going to put it all in the transcript. So you'll get a link that links back to the transcript, and we'll put little, definitions in under these other cybersecurity terminology that you might not know totally. But I wanted to talk about a few at the top because, like, especially this top one, the MFA and 2SV, that confuses me. So, Steve, could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, and I appreciate, Carolyn, that you've started adding this definition slide to these decks. I've been doing these webinars with you and even before you for a long time, and I think it's a really nice addition to the template, if you will, because yeah, I think I forget as someone who's deeply immersed in this stuff sometimes that definitions help. So MFA, which stands for multi-factor authentication, is the idea that in addition to maybe your password, you are doing something else. That's where the multi comes from. Doing something else to confirm your identity. And most typically, you might be using your phone, which you've registered ahead of time with the system to like approve your login on your phone. The other things that we see sometimes are these little FIDO keys, they're called, or YubiKey is the main brand. It's an actual physical key that you plug into the USB port on your computer or your phone, and it's like another, like you push that button, and since that key is registered ahead of time, you can't get in with just your password. You have to have this second factor to get in, and it really has cut down on account breaches because passwords with computers are pretty easy to, like, not pretty easy, but they are hackable because there's, even if it's a 10 character password, you can just try all the different passwords with a computer program and get in, or use people can sometimes use easy to guess passwords or they reuse passwords. So this multi-factor authentication helps a lot. 2SV is just Google's language for that. So it stands for two-step verification. It is literally MFA with a different name. And I'm not quite sure why Google went its own way and didn't want to just call it MFA like everything else, every other platform provider has called it. But when you see 2SV, that just isn't, to me, an indication that you're dealing with Google and they're just using their term for MFA or multi-factor authentication. I'll go through the other ones real quick. Spoofing is a place where people can be vulnerable to security attacks. It's when an email appears to come from someone that it's not coming from, right? That could be internal. I get emails that appear to be from my boss Johanny. It has her name, it has her email address, but it is not from her. And if I click on the links in that, I'm probably going to be leading to bad outcomes because someone is spoofing her account. There are things that you can do configuration wise to reduce the likelihood of that. One of the places that that can be done is using the next term here for definitions, which is DNS. DNS is the it's a very old protocol. It's the internet's way of like resolving um, friendly names to IP addresses, to names that machines understand. So when you go to www.communityit.com, you're going to a friendly name, but the domain name server, the DNS servers out on the internet need to know that www.communityit.com goes to this specific server with this specific address. That system's been expanded to have all sorts of rules that are because it's a place where an organization can sort of publish some stuff about their systems that is considered authoritative and safe. So if in my DNS records I say the only people that are allowed to send email from the domain name communityit.com are Microsoft 365 and MailChimp. Those are the only two systems that are allowed to send that, or from Google and MailChimp. And the email from Google needs to be secured with this encryption key. Those things can be done with DNS, and that is what's used now to reduce that spoofing. So
So
that's
it
an
protects
important
you. You
thing.
can set it
It
up to
protects you.
protect you.
Yeah, yeah. And email is still remains one of the vectors, which of course Google Workspace has email. So it remains one of the vectors by which we see a lot of attacks and breaches, because it is such an old protocol. Email has been around for 50 years, and so as a result of that, it's vulnerable to newfangled things. And so some of these DNS fixes are like responses to that. Okay, I got to speed things up. Admin console, that's just the term for the web page that you log into. It's at admin.google.com. Everybody has the same address, but once you log in it, they take you to your admin console. And it's where you configure the settings. It's also where you set up new users or get rid of or offboard old users, set up Google Shared Drives. All the things that you do in Google Workspace are done in the admin console as far as administration goes in the admin console. Google Shared Drives are repositories for documents. Traditionally, not traditionally, at the beginning of time, when Google first sort of rolled out their suite of services with email and so forth, they just used what I now call my drives, where each person had their own drive, and if they wanted to share folders with other people or documents with other people to collaborate, they would do that from their My Drive. And some years later, at some point, Google rolled out these shared drives, and shared drives are much more organizational owned and less owned by individuals. And so there's more opportunities for good governance and structure and security. And so we talk about Google Shared Drives in the context of security because it's basically a richer, better way of collaborating and storing documents in Google Workspace. And then finally, user account offboarding. User is active in your organization. They're a staff person. They've been working for you for a few years. Then they leave the job. They get another job or whatever. They're no longer working for you. How do you unwind their presence in your Google Workspace? That's called user account offboarding. And then that is a process that is a weak spot in a lot of workspace administration. And as a result, it is a place where security is sometimes compromised.
The offboarding might apply to volunteers as well if you give them an email for
Absolutely.
your
Or That's
your
right.
organization, and then you're not keeping track of who's not volunteering for you anymore, then they have, this account that's still open. So it's
Yeah.
important to keep track of. So what are the biggest risks specific to Google Workspace at nonprofits? Because some of those, like not offboarding a staff person who may be disgruntled, like that could happen in any platform, but specific to Google Workspace, what are we looking at?
Yeah. So to the point of the offboarding, I think it's more just that's the last one on the list here, but I will since you just brought it up, I'll bring it up. I think people know that if they're firing a disgruntled employee, that they're going to do whether they have a formal procedure that they follow rigorously or not, they're going to reset the password, maybe suspend the user. Google is complicated by the fact that if you suspend the user, their email stops working. So it's not, in some ways, Google's processes don't make offboarding as easy as some other platforms might, because you want to suspend the user because that makes sense, right? But then all of a sudden, you might want them to still be able to receive email. You just want that email to like be read by somebody else in your organization, not obviously by the person who's no longer there. But the email address might still be valuable. Like if it's, someone who's still, that email address is still getting, let's say they're a program manager. They might still be getting emails from your external stakeholders. You just need their manager to read the emails. And that can all be done, but that's what the offboarding procedure is about. No, I think the risk is more not I'm firing a disgruntled employee. The problem is we don't have a great policy for offboarding users. And so we have all these user accounts and we don't know what the passwords are anymore. And so it's just an opportunity for someone to like try to wheedle their way in through some sort of dictionary attack or something. It might not be the highest risk thing if you have good MFA, 2SV in Google's case, enforcement and so on, but it's still like it is, you want to, part of security is reducing your threat landscape as much as possible. So anytime you have unused accounts just lying around, that's an opportunity. It may not be a likely opportunity, but you want to try to reduce that. The first one on the list is not specific to Google, but it is definitely worth putting on any list when you're talking about the biggest risks, which is just phishing and credential theft. So yeah, maybe the title of this slide could have just been biggest risks to Google Workspace at nonprofits. It is a big risk, but it's not specific to Google Workspace. Then also not specific to Google Workspace, but true for Google Workspace users. You definitely want to have that 2SV system set up, configured, and you want to have it enforced. One of the areas that can be tricky is I'm bouncing around and I apologize for that. But the second to last one on this list, shared and generic accounts, that's where 2SV sometimes runs aground because it's very clear if I'm logging in as me that I'm the only one who should be able to, on my phone, say, yes, that's me, let me in. But if I'm also sharing an account called info at or donations at or whatever, then maybe there's four of us sharing that password. And how do we do the 2SV for that? Because all four of us need to have it set up on our phones. It's not that it's impossible to do, but it's very unwieldy. So we help our clients work around those things by using like Google Groups for like those kinds of email addresses. So you don't have a user account called donations at nonprofit.org, but instead you might have a Google group called donations at nonprofit.org and you configure it. And then the members of that group can read those emails and respond to them. But shared and generic accounts can be problems because when there's a one-to-one correspondence, this human being has this user account, it's very easy to sort of keep the security and they quickly notice if their account's doing weird things, they're going to raise their hand and say, hey, I don't know why, but like, all my friends say that that I'm emailing them. I'm not emailing them. What's going on? And then so we investigate and we solve that problem. But if it's a generic account that people only log into occasionally and someone gets into that somehow, then maybe no one even notices for a week or two, because it's not managed very well. And then the 2SV and so on. Wire fraud and business email compromise is sort of part of that phishing credential theft. It's actually kind of the same idea, but we do see that is one of the things that we still see is that and I think it has to do with in many ways it's not specific to Google Workspace, but it might be specific to nonprofits. Nonprofits frequently have um, I don't want to say this in a way that's insulting to anybody, but like maybe looser like processes for handling money sometimes it might be more informal. So like for an executive director to say to someone, "Hey, I need to take care of this situation because this donor is asking for it." That might be more likely to happen at a small nonprofit than it might be to happen at a bank, where there's very rigorous like processes that everybody knows to go through. And so we have seen wire fraud, and that's a generic term for like banking, like talking, or buying, what are the gift cards, those kinds of things happen, and we see that a fair amount, less than we used to because people are getting more sophisticated about it, but it still happens. And then this Google Drive files. So this goes back to the shared drives. It's good to use shared drives, but it is also important when you use shared drives that you structure the configuration appropriately. Do you want to allow external sharing from that particular Google Drive? Who are the members of it? All of those kinds of things. Oh, and then the last one, sorry, man, and I'm running out of your, I'm getting off your schedule, Carolyn. But the unmanaged personal accounts, that's not super common unless you have a relatively new account where maybe you weren't using Google Workspace before and now you are. But people can sign up for um, like Google Drive as a regular consumer, as a person, not as a member of your enterprise, of your organization, and use your organization's domain name, like their email address. And if you weren't in Google at the time, so so it is possible that personal they're potentially Gmail accounts or Google accounts that are associated with your domain name, but they're not actually in your Google Workspace. And there's a place in the admin portal where you can see who that list is. Oftentimes it's long ago, long departed employees, and it's probably not a risk,
Or from
but
early
they're out
on,
there.
maybe
Yeah,
when you
from
were
early
setting
on.
it up, they
Yeah,
had their own email, like on your
that's right.
board when you were setting up.
That's right.
I feel like I want to mention here that if you need help doing some of the things in the admin portal, Google
Yeah.
does have a knowledge base. You can look up questions of like, how do I find this? Where do I do that?
Yeah, and I always give Microsoft credit for like owning Windows and like Microsoft 365 and Microsoft Office, the desktop suite, Word, Excel, and how useful that is for that world. One of the nice things about Google is they own Google. So Googling a question, actually, I don't know, I find that it works really well, and I like Google's knowledge base articles. We call them KBs. I like their knowledge base articles more than I like Microsoft's for a um, non non professional IT person. So if you're managing your IT for your nonprofit and it's not your main job or it's not what you were trained in, but you're doing the best you can, I think you're going to get good mileage out of Google's KBs, and you can be in that case, I think, thankful that you're not doing the same thing in Microsoft. I think Microsoft is okay, but they tend to be more technical, harder to read. You need to bring more background to it than you do to Google. Google is a little bit more uh, tries to keep things simple,
It's
and that's
very
helpful.
consumer
Yeah,
oriented. Yeah. We
yeah,
have one quick question on can you transfer or forward a suspended account in Google Workspace to
you can. So
talking about
that's
that?
what I was talking about, how you can see those accounts, but the trick, not tr you can. You can, yes. For the ones that are long, long, long departed, I don't know whether you might need to like it might be tricky because that the email may or may not work. But yes, you can do that. Yes. Yes, that's a
Yeah.
short answer.
Okay. All right, yes, we're gonna move along a little bit. So what can you do right now to protect your organization? First and next steps. I think we've talked a little bit about some of these if you want to kind of run down.
Yeah. So, yes, let's just start with the easy one. Make sure that 2SV is turned on. And that's by default turned on, but it's not by default enforced, I don't think, for at least for older workspace tenants that have been established for a while. So you need to turn it on. It's a little Google is different from Microsoft in this regard. With Microsoft, you enable it or it's enabled and you tell everybody to go ahead and get it set up and you warn them that you're going to be enforcing it on Friday. So everybody needs to get it done by Friday, yada, yada, yada. And then on Friday, you enforce it. And the next time they try to log on, they can't get on until they set up MFA. So they're fine, they're forced to. And that is still a change management concern because if they're like logging on right before a meeting, that's a really important meeting, and now they are like losing 5 minutes because they're setting up MFA. So, it's still a concern. But Google's much more challenging in terms of change management, in that with Google, if you have not set it up and it gets enforced, you just can't log in. At that point, you need to open a ticket with the help desk or the administrator, whoever that is, and they need to like work with you to because you need to do it ahead of time, but it should still be done. So it is important. It is possible to make exceptions. So if it just absolutely has to have an exception for a user account, that can be done. But the recommendation is that you enforce MFA or 2SV for everyone. Auditing your accounts refers to sort of this offboarding and also like who has administrative privileges. We have seen clients where it seemed like it was the easiest thing in the world was just to make almost everybody a super admin, or all the executive super admins, and that's a risk because if an account is breached, that person has too much power in that situation. So look at that. Look at those, what the accounts are. Are there accounts that you can deprecate, so forth. The Google Drive sharing settings is we talked about already. I won't go into it again, but there are settings for Google Drives. Things like who can share, what can who things can be shared to, whether other who the what there's yeah. Anyway, you want to look at those things and use Google Shared Drives. That is, I think, a security concern. If you are just using My Drives and sharing folders from My Drives, that's really something that you want to. It's hard to correct, and we do have a blog post about how it's challenging to correct once it's out there already. But it's worth putting on your map that we do want to get this corrected at some point and figure out how to do that. So use Google Shared Drives. Login alerts are a nice touch. That's available at the free tier. So if um, if you do have super admins, you could have it set so that every time a super admin logs in, the other the other someone there's alerts being sent out to the other super admins or to the other contacts for the account. That's helpful. Training staff that is really helpful, explaining how phishing works and helping people understand that email is a threat, that chats and texts are a threat, that this is not just email anymore. Those are all things that we can do. We talked about offboarding, and we talked about the DNS policy to reduce email spoofing. And I won't go into it now, but it's things like DMARC, DKIM. These are things that you can do so that you can't stop spoofing external. If an external, like your staff are getting emails from other organizations, they might be spoofed. That you can't control. You can only control your own. But it's really good for your own staff fooled by emails that appear to be from within your organization. That's one thing. Also, not to have the reputational damage of it's not a breach. No one's actually sending email from your Google Workspace, but that it appears to be from your Google Workspace, and because you haven't done enough to turn up the dial on what the spoofing protection is.
Yeah, and I know, I'm sorry, I was just looking for it quickly. I know we have a blog post on the DMARC and DKIM, but I'll have to find it and share it maybe in the transcript also. We have one more quick question. Is it possible to disable downloading or printing documents in Google Workspace?
Yes, I believe that it is.
All right.
But I don't know if it's possible at the free tier. I'm sorry that I don't have that at my fingertips.
We can
Um,
provide, we'll answer it over on Reddit and we'll
yeah,
provide it in the transcript. We'll make
yeah.
sure we have that right answer. All right, now I want to move on to our next quiz poll, which is which security risk hits closest to home at your organization? And this one is multiple choice, so you can choose all that apply. And the first option is weak or shared passwords, staff clicking on phishing links. You may already have had that. Oversharing files in Google Drive, And by that, Steve, we mean like when you say this link is everyone can use this link,
Maybe, I mean,
oversharing,
that might be one risk, or that uh, files that are shouldn't be shared externally are shared externally. I mean, there's
right?
a lot of
Maybe
different ways that you
finance
can
or
yeah, that you
yeah.
can overshare. I do think anonymous links can be a risk, depending on where they're posted and how they're used.
All right. Former employee accounts are still active. Not sure where our gaps is. That's a valid answer. Other, if you have something other and you don't mind putting it in chat, we'd love to hear if there's something that we didn't capture here that you are worried about at your organization, and not applicable if this is, you have perfect
Mm.
security. So,
We just got
yeah,
a
someone put
good
in
one
chat.
chatted.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The
that's a good one. We
staff
should have put that
insist
on
on
our list.
using personal email and not taking security seriously. That is, you can try doing more of the training and, trying to bring everyone along on a security journey of why it's so important and what the risks are. But it takes prioritization and it can be really hard. And especially if it's somebody that's very set in their ways, that can be hard. Someone put in the chat forwarding an org email to a personal account. I'd love to hear a little elaboration on that because I'm not sure.
I think what they there is it's sort of some detail on the first person's concern about insisting on using personal accounts.
Personal
So
emails, yeah.
you can set up an automatic forwarding on your organizational email. Therefore, you don't have to really worry about your organizational email because you just
Yeah.
get it in your Gmail or Hotmail
Yep.
or AOL account or whatever.
Yep.
Um,
Someone says conducting work on their phone. People conducting work on their phone. And yeah, the person who said forwarding the org email to a personal account, if you're in higher education, it creates compliance issues, I'm sure, like healthcare as well. So, okay, I'm going to end the poll. We've had pretty good participation and share it. Steve, can you see that?
yes.
Okay.
So I'm going to read it not in the order of the list, but just in the order of most popularity. So the most popular was the staff clicking on phishing links was chosen by 50% of our staff. Of course, you can choose more than one thing, so this isn't going to add up to 100, I don't think. But that makes sense, and it is like one of the places where not only maybe is it like a likely thing, but it's also like the risk is high in terms of what the payoff could be. It could be really bad news if it happens. And then we had weak or shared passwords and oversharing of files in Google Drive. That was chosen by a third of our respondents. Both of them were chosen by a third of our respondents. Former employee accounts are still active was chosen by 16, I'm sorry, by 16%. And then we had about a third, 29% saying they're not sure where the gaps are. And then we did get some others that were chatted there.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, that's fair, right? That you don't know what you don't know about
Yep.
what might be insecure. So hopefully this webinar is helping you with that. So our next question is, what if you want more? Do you need to move to the paid tier of Google Workspace to get those extra features?
So Google Workspace does have extra features, and we in that earlier slide we had some of the ones listed that are like paid tier only, things like data loss prevention and e-discovery and so forth. And you may need those, and we have a slide coming up to speak to that. But I did want to highlight that in our view, um, the next layers that you would probably want to add may not even be available or best available from Google Workspace, even at the very top tiers. So, for example, one of the things that our CTO and security expert Matt Eshelman views as like a fundamental component of good layered security as a formal security awareness training program where there's accountability and data collected. And, we this is not just an informal training, at a staff meeting ad hoc. And if you missed that staff meeting, you missed it. Like this is like a formal training program. That's not something that I'm aware Google offers. Like we offer that to our clients through a system called Know Before, and I like it a lot. I think it's a good system. There's many. I'm not endorsing Know Before above the other ones, But that's a third party system. And I would say before I started thinking about the higher tiers of Google, I'd want to have that. Um, Similarly, backups are an overlooked part of security. But when things go wrong, you can be really glad, like if there was a breach and someone deleted a bunch of stuff as part of a breach, or the classic thing where all your files are encrypted, ransomware, and you can't recover your files without paying the ransom. If you have a backup, you don't need to recover the files because you have a backup. I would say that we would say that backups from a third party are part of the value of good backups is not to rely on Google for that. Google does have retention schemes, and at the higher tier, you can put some e-discovery like protections on files being backed up. But in a perfect world, you're not relying on Google at all. You have it in a completely separate platform. So that would be another third-party service that you could buy. Um, Google does a great job with their native email protection, but if you want, like, we would say it's worth getting a third-party backup, an advanced email protection from a third party. And then finally, you can configure in at the higher tiers of Google essentially the same things that a managed cloud detection and response can do. Things like uh, we talked about log one alerts. You can configure those. You can get into the weeds and say, hey, if someone tries to log in to this account from a country other than the United States, we want to lock them out. And you can set up all of these rules, and that is available in a higher tier of Google Workspace. But to me, it makes more sense to use like, and this is a service that again we would offer to our clients, but it's not saying you need to buy it from us. I mean, there's lots of places that would sell this, but a managed cloud detection and response layer on top of Google Workspace where someone else is doing all of that for you probably makes more sense. You might pay $5 per user per month or $6 per user per month. Something, not nothing, but having that layer from a third party might be better than bumping up your Google Workspace tier.
But sometimes you might be interested in that. And we laid out a couple of cases. So you want to talk
Yeah,
about
yeah. So
these
this is the
situations?
acknowledgement that the free tier doesn't work for everybody, right? So if you're a nonprofit that handles a lot of financial data or healthcare data, you might be benefiting from bumping up a tier. Um, if you need to do a lot of e-discovery or legal holds, that's something that comes in with a product in the platform called Google Vault. I think you can actually buy it separately, but it's also included. I think it starts at the Google for Business Plus level, and it's really nice. But that is not something that you get out of the free tier. And then the other thing that we would say is that if you do a lot of third-party app integrations with APIs and so on, the free tier doesn't really do a great job of providing the management hooks for that. Like it allows you to set them up, but then you don't really have a lot of insight into them. And so if you're doing it a lot, and I think the people that are in these situations probably know they're in these situations. So I don't necessarily think this is like the slide that's the take home message and that everyone's going to like, oh, thank goodness Steve mentioned that since we're, getting sued all the time, we should probably have, a higher tier of Google. Like that already, but it is acknowledging that the free tier is not a one size fits all. There are times when you need to be up a couple levels.
But you can be. I mean, that's the thing. I
You
think
can
a
be.
lot of clients come to us thinking that, well, now I'm at this level of sophistication. I have to get off of Google Workspace and find something more
That's right.
serious and more secure. And there are giant corporations, big companies, big nonprofits, health systems
That's
are
right.
on Google Workspace. So
That's right. That's
it
right.
can work for you. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the nonprofit discount, you still don't pay the retail price for these products, right? So like if an enterprise license is, $30 per user per month, and I don't have that number in my head, but if that's what it is, you might only be paying $10. And
There's a
again,
discount.
don't hold me to those prices, but you get a significant discount. Um, you just don't get it for free anymore.
So there's a couple of questions in chat, but I'm going to save them for our Q&A slide, which is coming up so that we can get over this workspace, Google Workspace security best practices. And some of this is pretty, I don't know, common sense, but I want to make sure that we wrap it up.
Yeah, it's good to have this, opportunity to just take talk about the take home messages. Um, yeah, starting out with the fact that, as we said at the very beginning, Google does a great job of securing their infrastructure, but you need to do your part to make sure that your configurations and settings and that your people are contributing to security, whether that's through, you're doing trainings for them, and checking the security, the configurations and so forth. But the nonprofit tier is good. Do start with something, and I would say, MFA 2SV, if that's not done, just make that your top priority. Um, Training can be one of your top priorities as well. And then consider these third-party tools as the next layer before you start talking about like whether you need to go to Business Plus or Enterprise, for most nonprofits, I would say. And then, yes, there are times when the free tier is not sufficient, and some layers of third-party tools doesn't make us. I mean, you might still have those, but you, at the end of the day, are going to be valuing what, let's say, Google Enterprise provides.
I want to make sure we get to some Q&A. So I'm going to go through this slide a little bit quickly. This is a slide that we use on our regular cybersecurity webinars that we do, which if you need that information, all of our previous webinars are under webinars on our website, communityit.com. So you can find all of the videos there. But I thought it was interesting. This is kind of our generic what you should do to protect your organization slide. And it really lines up very nicely with what you should do in Google Workspace. There's just a couple of extra little quirks and turns in there. So I was so happy, Steve, that you could help us, dive in a little bit on some of those things that we need to make sure to be aware of if you're using Google Workspace. I'm going to put these resources in the chat so that you all have them. Here's some resources on our website and some that are specific to Google as well, where you can find more support, more information. As I said, Google is so consumer oriented and they don't assume that everyone that's using Google Workspace is an admin and has a tech background. So they have a lot of very accessible information if you're looking for more, how to do some of the things on the admin console. So you can have those, all those resources are in chat. So I'm going to move right on to the Q&A. And Steve, we have a couple in chat and a couple in Q&A. So let me just go back quickly. And here was one on how can you prevent organizational Google Drive documents from automatically saving to or appearing in a user's personal Google Drive if they access company links while logged on to their personal Google account. Is that possible? I mean, it seems like if you have an organization account, you download that document, you can then upload it to your personal account unless there's a policy against that.
When you are, for the most part, the model, and it's not just for Google, it's, with most models, when you have given someone access to a file, you are giving them access to the file and you're relying on them to, and that's maybe where training and um, uh,
Privacy policy.
accountability, not accountability, training and people being good stewards, trying to appeal to that whole nonprofit ethos that like you need to do this for the good of the mission, follow the
Yeah.
rules kind of
I
thing
mean, you
might
could take a
might get somewhere.
screenshot of it, if
That's
you're
right.
looking at
That's
it.
right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we can, if there's a deeper answer, we can give that over on Reddit. There was another question here. Is there a way in Google Workspace admin to check if users have a weak password? That's a good question.
Yeah, I think that there is. I haven't looked at that for a while, but I'm pretty sure that uh
It'll give you just
you
not
can
what their password is, but a
it
reading of
doesn't it
like
doesn't
this
not
is.
tell you the password, no, but
Yeah.
it can apprise you of and you can also see in the admin portal who has a configured 2SV and who has not. And that's kind of an important part of, enforcing it is you need to know kind of, okay, when I turn on enforcement, who am I going to lock out? Because
Yeah.
you can see that. Yeah.
Here's a question. How can we promote file and information security through Google Mail? I'm aware that sharing confidential information in an unsecured Gmail as an attachment can have security concerns.
It can, yes. And, I think training is one of the things. There is all sorts of, at the higher tiers, you can do a lot of, that's called data loss protection. You can set rules around some of this stuff, like, preventing things from being attached to emails and so on. But honestly, it's like, to some extent, you can't, people need to do things because they've been convinced that it is, they need to do follow that it's important for the good of the organization to follow these rules. I do think, though, that another angle on this might go back to the uh, original poll where a couple people, two people, I guess, said that maybe their organization took security so seriously that it prevented them from doing their jobs. So in some ways, that question about, hey, what if people are emailing, like emailing an attachment in a Gmail may not be as secure as like sharing a link of the file or sharing it
Yeah.
in some more secure manner. Well, then we need to make sure that our users are able and trained on how to do those more secure ways. Like if they're emailing attachments because they believe that's the best way for them to get their job done, and they want to get their job done, that the motivation there is the right motivation. So we need to figure out as IT administrators, okay, but that's not very secure. So what can we do? What alternatives do we have that you can still get your job done? So maybe, Google shared drives, save the files there and allow this one shared drive to have members, you know, that are not in your organization, but they're like the outside consultants. So maybe there's a finance shared drive and the finance, the outsourced accountant is a member of that shared drive. And therefore, your, um, your internal finance person isn't constantly emailing sensitive financial documents to these consultants. Instead, the consultants just go right to that shared drive where the stuff is, securely um, saved.
Yeah, no, that sounds like good advice. We have time for one more, and then there's so many more questions in the chat. So we're definitely going to have those over on Reddit after this. And you can always get in touch with me as well, through the website or, on LinkedIn, or, however you want to get in touch with me if you have another question or your question wasn't answered and you really need the answer. Sorry to the person who wanted to talk about Workspace and Gemini. We are going to have a webinar in the fall that's about cybersecurity. We will be talking a lot about AI then, and we did a webinar on cybersecurity and AI specifically in February. So you might want to go back and check that one. I know that we mentioned Gemini, but we didn't get deep into it. But I thought this question was interesting. Do you recommend using Google Drive app or using the web browser?
So quickly on the Gemini thing, I would encourage the person who asked that question, and we can answer it in the Reddit channel later. But go ahead and Google it. There's a lot of good stuff that you can do to control Gemini to some extent, um, including disabling it if that's what you need to do. Um, on the question about the Google Drive app, I do think I mean, it depends. Like a lot of a good consulting answer is it depends, right? I do think that if you have, typical nonprofit operational requirements and security requirements, the Google Drive app on a PC, if you are taking steps to make sure that the PC is secured, maybe you have device management on the PC, it's a company-owned PC, you have good hygiene on the PC and everything, then it can be really nice and very convenient for the person to have the Google Drive app. Um, if you're using Google Docs and Sheets, like you're not using Office versions of those, you're not using Word or Excel, but you're using Google Docs and Google Sheets, then at some point the browser becomes just as convenient anyway, and probably you don't need to have the Drive app. But if if I were helping a small nonprofit get set up, I would probably go ahead and deploy the Google Drive for the convenience of the users, so that, again, I'm not trying to make life difficult for my users, because if I make life difficult for my users, that's when they start doing crazy things to get around me to do their jobs. And I understand that they're just trying to do their jobs. So instead, I want to give them the tools so that they can do their jobs within my restrictions. And we find that balance.
I'm sorry to hurry you along, but in the interest of time, if there are people who can stay over a minute or so, we might go over a minute. Apologize. I went quickly through our learning objectives. I think you hit them all just wonderfully, Steve. Thank you so much. I want to make sure to let people know that next month I'll be going back to AI topics. We'll be welcoming some experts to talk about where you go with AI at your nonprofit if you're past the experimenting phase. So, how do you get to an AI that is genuinely embedded in what your organization does and how you work? And we're going to learn about an AI maturity model that they use at PTKO Consulting to help their clients implement AI intentionally. So, if you're new on your AI journey, we have a lot of other resources on our site about getting started, looking at ethical frameworks, creating AI policy. We have a download that you can use, a template. I'm really excited about this upcoming webinar because there are a lot of webinars out there around the early stages. And we do have clients who have been using AI for over a year and want to know these next steps. Like, how do you take that next step? So our guests, Mimi and George, are going to share what best practices are out there. This is an evolving space. There aren't people, nonprofits who have been using AI for very much longer than that. But if that is where you are on your AI journey, please join us again next month. That's at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific on Wednesday, July 15th. I just shared the registration page in the chat. It's on our website at communityit.com. Please don't forget as you exit today to take our short survey. It's 6 questions, 6 easy questions. One lucky winner chosen at random receives a $25 gift certificate, and it really helps us. And then join us on Reddit r/nonprofit IT management for more Q&A. As I said, we had a bunch of questions in the queue. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of them. There's some really good ones in there. So Steve is going to come over on Reddit for another 15, 20 minutes to answer some of those questions. And we will see you here next month, I hope, with our next monthly webinar. So thank you everyone for joining us. Your time is a gift. You spent an hour with us. We really appreciate it. Steve, thank you so much for sharing all your expertise and wisdom about Google Workspace. It's so easy to get into, but it's not super easy to make sure you're doing everything right. So we really appreciate your time today.
Thank you. And thanks to all the people that were chatting and helping answer questions. I love the community spirit. That was really great to see.
No, it was really great. So thank you again, everyone, and we will see you over on Reddit.